This video is going to go over placements by session and how to set up a session. So when you're ready to set up one of your sessions, you're going to go to placements by session. And then here you'll see a list of your existing sessions. Now keep in mind, if you want to find a session and it's not listed here, you will want to remove this filter, favorite only. If you click on the X next to that, all of your sessions are going to appear. Those favorites are really nice because, you might have certain sessions that you're working with primarily, the ones that are currently going on, or maybe have an open wish list, or you have a slot request out for, or something like that. You'll want to have starred so that you can find them really quickly. So what you'll just want to do if you want to make a session a favorite is you can just star it. If you want to remove it from your favorites, you just click on that star again and that takes it off. So that's how you can see your favorites. And when you go to right to placements by session, the default is that only your favorites will show. Also, if you have multiple users at your school, each user can have their own favorites. So keep that in mind too. Different people can be working with different sessions and have different favorites. That's totally fine. Also keep in mind when you're working with sessions that if you start to have a lot of these, you can always search for them. So if you want to search only the ones that take place in 2020, for example, you can fill out calendar year 2020 and click search, and then only those sessions that take place in 2020 will come up. You can also search just for a batch. That's really helpful. A lot of times schools with multiple campuses, you might just search for one of the batches in your campus and then click search, and then that session will come up there. So just some things to keep in mind when you're working with placements by session. But when you're ready to add a new session, you're just going to come here and click add session. And then you'll have two options, either to create a brand new session, which is what we'll do today, or you can clone an existing session. That will be really helpful in the future. If you have level 1A fieldwork and you need to create level 1A fieldwork for the following year, you can just clone that previous year's and then kind of copy over a lot of information. So it makes it really fast and easy. But right now we're just going to go over creating a brand new session. So you're going to select create new session and click OK. And then at that point, my session information fields are going to show up. So first I'm going to want to label the session. Make sure you name it in a way that really makes sense to you so that you know which session this is, and keep in mind, again, from year to year, you want to be able to distinguish, was this the one that took place during 2019 or 2020 or what have you. Then you'll want to choose the batch that this session applies to here. Keep in mind, if the batch that you need doesn't show up in this list, you will need to go to the configuration section and add that batch first. Then you'll want to indicate the number of weeks that that session is, as well as the calendar year that it takes place during. Then you have some questions you can answer. First, it's going to be active. You'd pretty much only turn that off, maybe after your students graduate and you don't want to see this session anymore. Show on slot request form, that just means you might be able to send it on a slot request. If this is one that's already taken place in the past or something, or you already have all your students assigned, you're not going to be sending a slot request for it. You could turn that off. But if at some point you might include it on a slot request, that will just, make this session available on that list. Student review confirmation, if we turn this on, what that's going to do is at the top of the student's My Placement screen, it's going to create a checkbox for them where they can go in and say that they've reviewed this placement, that they know that they're assigned here, that they will fulfill the requirements of the site before they go, whatever you want that checkbox to say, but it's just kind of a way for you to know that the student has seen this placement and acknowledges that they have seen that. So if you want that on, you're just going to turn that on. Then it is going to prompt you. You can put a due date in for the date that you want your students to have completed that by. If you would like that, you can put a due date. And then here below placement review instruction, that's where you'll type what that checkbox says. So, I have reviewed my placement. All right. Session coordinator here, this is just going to allow you to choose from the school staff who is the person kind of coordinating this session. Really helpful for schools if you have, one person who handles CE1 and CE2 and one who does CE3 and CE4, or, one person who does level 1s, one person who does level 2s, something like that. You can kind of select that person here. If you don't have someone like that, if it's everybody kind of helps out, that's totally fine. You could just leave that section blank. If you'd like to type out the semester here, you absolutely could. And then if you have a description of the session you want to type in here, you can do that as well. Keep in mind you can always edit this and come back, so if you don't have it right on hand when you're creating the session, that's fine. Some people like to put something in here, this is the student's first level 1 experience. Or, some people like to copy something over from the syllabus. So whatever you prefer to do, it's up to you. You can put whatever you'd like in that description field, or you are also welcome to leave it blank. When you're finished, you're going to go ahead and save. So at that point, we've created our basic setup of that session. And you'll see here, as soon as the page loads, it's going to go to like the session setup section, and there we can go in and add the dates. All right, great. So all that information we just put in was an add edit session information. So if you would ever need to edit that, you can just come here, add edit session information, and come in and make changes to any of those fields. If you want to type in that description at that point, feel free to do so. All right, session sequences is where you're going to put in your dates. So for a lot of like PT schools or OT schools for your level 2, you're pretty much just going to have one set of dates. The students start on January 1st and end on, February 28th. And all of the students pretty much are starting on and ending on those dates. Maybe one might start a week later and end a week later or something like that. But for the most part, they're all doing that set of dates. That's totally fine. In that case, you're just going to add one sequence. However, if you're doing like part-time clinical experiences, or for a lot of OT schools for the level 1s, you might end up having multiple sequences. So, you might have students going out every Monday for the month of January, or you might have other students going every Tuesday for the month and other students going every Wednesday. And then maybe you have some students who go the first week of the month and some students who go every day for the second week of the month, or whatever, the differences might be. In that case, you'll want to add each of those as a separate sequence. And then if your school has a rotation where they need to do, like, let's say, the students just have to complete 40 hours at some point within the semester, it doesn't matter what the specific dates are, and it is so specific to each student, varies, would it be impossible to put all of the possible sequences in. In that case, you could just add one sequence and have it be, the start date be the first date of the semester and the end date be the last date of the semester. The important thing there is just going to be the duration in weeks, just needs to match whatever the minimum weeks were for that session. So when we created the session information, that duration in weeks just needs to match the minimum weeks on the session. Additionally, if you do have some students who are going to do like a split placement where they're going to do 6 weeks at one and 6 weeks at another, and for a total of 12 weeks, and then minimum weeks were listed as 12 on the session information, you could create sequences like that too. So you could create 2 separate 6-week sessions to place those students twice, and then a 12-week session for all the students who are just going to one site. So talk to your CSR, if you need more information and more help with setting up those sessions. I'm just going to show you a sample of like a pretend level 1 here where we might have multiple sequences. So when we add that sequence, we're going to type in the sequence order. Again, if you just have one sequence, you can just type 1. That's totally fine. You can do a number here if you have multiples, or if it's going to be like Mondays, you could type that out. And then even though they're going out multiple weeks, really all of their days might just add up to 1 week. And then we can choose the color here. So if you want to have color coding, that's totally fine. Some people like to have different sequences in the same rotation be different colors, just so it's really fast for you when you're placing the students to see which sequence each placement is in. And then you'll just want to put that date range. So let's say, this one is in August, and they're going to go Mondays from the 5th here to the 26th. All right. And then here we have some additional questions. How many CEU credits the CI or educator gets. So if you want to give the educator or CI CEU credits on a certificate at the end of this rotation, we can merge this number onto your certificate. So if you do have something like that, you'll want to put that number there. If you don't, just put a 0. That way, just in case you accidentally create the certificates, the 0 is all that will merge in there. You could also, instead of CEU credits, merge a number of clinical hours. So some schools find it complicated to give CEUs because of state regulations, and they like to just say, this educator or CI supervised a student for this many hours. So it's a really nice thing you can do, and this can merge to the certificate as well. Additionally, if your student has 2 CIs or educators, this number of clinical hours can go based on their percentage of supervision. So if the student were to have 2 for a 40-hour experience, we could do 20 and 20 if they needed to, or 10 and 30, or whatever the breakdown was. We can break it down based on percentage. So keep that in mind. Sharing for sequences is pretty rare. Only a few schools use that. So if you need kind of some special situations where you might have 2 batches that kind of share slots for these sessions, that's what that sharing is. Talk to your CSR and we can work on setting that up. For the vast majority of schools, though, you won't need to share availability, so you can just skip that field. If all of the students in this sequence are going to be doing the exact same setting, and I don't just mean like pediatrics, I mean like very specific, hospital-based inpatient acute or something like that, you can select the setting here. But again, for the vast majority of schools, you're just going to be leaving these blank and not worrying about either of these questions. So you'll go ahead and save. And then if you have additional sequences, you'll go ahead and add those too. So I'm just going to go ahead and add one more. We'll pretend students could go out for this one. Those same set of weeks here in August, either Mondays or Tuesdays. And then I'm just going to make those a different color. That way on my assigned placement page, I'm really easily going to be able to tell whether my students are scheduled for the Mondays or the Tuesdays. All right, and now my sequence is created, and that's the basics of your session setup. So when we go back out here to placements by session, we're going to see here my list of sessions. Again, remember that favorites filter is automatically on, so if I want to see that session, I'm just going to remove that favorites filter. Now I can see that new session that I created here, and if I need to make any changes, I can go into the session setup. That's that blue button. And that's where I can go, if I need to edit that basic session information, or if I realize I put a date in wrong or something like that, I can absolutely go in there and edit the sequences as well as the session information.